out that in this group of people who've been doing this a long, long time. And yes, when we first started we were a lot younger, but now we're together. And you know, people on the left are used to kind of taking a hangdog attitude. I got to tell you that the anti-nuclear movement, the No Nukes campaign, since 1973, we have been winning. We are winners in this operation here. And Paul Gunter is here from almost as old as me, from Seabrook. When we first started in 1973, 1974, Richard Nixon said, remember Richard Nixon? He said there'd be 1,000 nuclear plants in the United States by the year 2000. 1,000 nukes, he got on national television. So there's 104. Who was responsible for those 896 that didn't get built? We were, you were. We did that. How many reactors are now, we paid a horrible price, but how many reactors are now operating in Japan? 2 out of 54, too many, but nonetheless. What's going to happen in Germany? Look at Europe. In this country, we only have 4 reactors more or less under construction. I will tell you right now, they will not be finished. There will never be another nuclear plant open in this country. And a lot of it has to do with what Michael has been doing. Michael married is the Nuclear Information Resource Service, as you all know. And he's been in it a long, long time. A lot of victories and a lot of fights still to go. There is absolutely no reason for us not to be totally upbeat. We have accomplished a tremendous amount in the last 30, 40 years. And we're really on the brink of doing this, because what's happened is the tide is now turned, and Michael talked about it, I'm sure. Renewables are cheaper now. There's no way in hell the capitalists build nuclear plants anymore. They got to be crazy, or that are part of the government. So nobody has been dogged in the trenches more than Michael Marriott over these years. I have tremendous, unparalleled respect for Michael, and so it's really an honor to hand you the mic. Thank you, Harvey. You know, if I'd known we could have a band here, I would have brought my band. I'm really missing out now. I want to play some drums. No, we're not quite that old. Almost, not quite. Anyway, I want to give a special thanks to all of you who are not from Washington, D.C. Give yourselves a hand. I want to thank you for coming to our place and bringing some real hope and change to Washington, D.C. And I want to pick up from what Harvey was just talking about. And it's good that he was talking about that, because, see, I believe revolutions are born out of hope, not despair. Revolutions are born because change is possible. And it's a couple things to be hopeful about. A couple weeks ago, the license for the Calvert Cliffs nuclear plant was denied by the NRC. And by the way, that one also knocked out the proposed 9 Mile Point nuclear plant. So that was a 2. That same week, Exelon Corporation, the nation's largest nuclear utility, you figure if anybody could build one, they could, they withdrew their application for 2 new reactors in Texas. We've got C.A.N on the run. They're defueling. They're laying off workers. And they're looking forward to some really miserable rate hearings coming up. We got Fort Calhoun. I mean, every month or so I read, something from Omaha Public Power. Well, we're going to open Fort Calhoun back up in a month, and then turns out, well, actually, what we meant to say was we're going to keep it closed for another 3 months, and that's just going on and on and on. So we got them on the run. That's the point. There is reason for hope.
And then half the project was defeated.
Did it? Woo! All right. I wasn't actually expecting that, and that's great. Crystal River.
Crystal River is a great example of the confidence of the nuclear industry. If you don't know the story about Crystal River, Florida, this is an old clone of 3 Mile Island. And they needed new steam generators, you know, same kind of process that San Onofre did, but same kind of process that a bunch of different reactors have done successfully in this country. Well, they decided they didn't want to do it the same way everybody else had done it, which had worked. So they decided to do it their own way. And they just cut right into the containment, and whole containment started cracking. And this repair job, it was supposed to be expensive. It was supposed to be, you know, $500, $600 million. Well, they're now looking at repair bills upwards of $3 billion just to try to fix this thing and let it run for another, you know, what, 10 years or so? That's sort of the level of confidence that we have in the nuclear industry right now. Crystal River's never going to open again. You might as well just knock that one off. Might as well say, well, we got 103, not 104. This is not happening. But, you know, I also want to talk about, so that's the hope end of things. I want to talk about the change end of things and sort of what we're up against here in Washington. Because you folks, especially those of you from out of town, you know, may not fully understand how it works here. You know, there's not a lot of us here. There's not a big lobbying contingent here. There's, you know, most of the big environmental groups, and if you were in the briefing today, you heard David Friedman talk about this, how, you know, a lot of the big environmental groups sort of, you know, stay away from the nuclear issue. I mean, they leave it up to us. And by us, I don't mean NEARS, I mean there's sort of broader 7 groups or so here that actually do work on these issues. Now that has its advantages and disadvantages. It means they can't, you know, screw up our message, but it means we don't have their resources. And so we really need you. And I'll tell you a story about a lobbying visit I went on. It's been quite a while now. This is actually over 20 years ago, but things haven't changed. I was in the building we were in today, the C.A.N building, with a friend of mine. We were lobbying on an emergency planning amendment at the time, introduced by Representative Markey, who was fighting back then, continues to fight today. And my friend and I, we were visiting various offices. We get in an elevator, and I comes on the elevator with us, you know, after we're in there. And I had no idea who he was. But my friend certainly did, because he was a congressman from Georgia. And the congressman from Georgia certainly knew who we were, because my friend had actually run against him in the Democratic primary the year before. So there was no cases of mistaken identity going on. And so we get in this conversation, and I asked him, I said, okay, Congressman, well, you know, how do you feel about the Markey Amendment? And the congressman goes, Markey Amendment, oh, it's great, states' rights, I love it. Now, my friend is a little smarter than I am. He says, well, Congressman, how are you going to vote on the Markey Amendments? Oh, I'm going to vote against it. Southern Company tells me I got no choice. You know, that's what we're up against. You know, every congressional district has a utility in it. Think about it. In over half of the congressional districts in this country, the utility is the largest employer. Now, they're not all nuclear utilities, but a good chunk of them are. So, you know, they're starting with that kind of edge, shall we say. Not to mention the vast amounts of money they have that we don't have. So when, shortly after the election of President Obama, we were maybe a little overly optimistic about how quickly we could change things here. But we went around to some congressional offices, to some friends, shall we say, and we asked them, oh, you know, what do we need to do? What's the biggest problem? And the answers were uniform. We're not hearing enough from you. We're not hearing enough from you. You don't have enough lobbyists, and we're not hearing from your constituents. And so that's when NEARS started doing our email alerts and setting up our system to allow you to Send emails to your Congress members to keep you informed regularly about every bill that comes up that may be of interest, that may affect things, or at least everyone we can track. And we've had incredible success. President Obama wanted to increase the loan guarantee program from $18.5 billion to $50 billion. He tried this 3 times himself, and some other members tried it various times. In fact, there were 8 different times they tried to increase the loan guarantee program since February 2009. We beat them every single time. You beat them. And that's because you acted. And my point is, you have to continue acting. You have to continue growing. Events like this are great. It's great to be able to get together. But persistence pays off. That Calvert Cliffs intervention, well, that took 4 years. 4 years. By the way, did I mention it's the first successful pro se intervention in history? We didn't have a lawyer. We couldn't afford one. We did it ourselves. But you got to be persistent. You got to keep at it. This is not a fight for where you can expect fast victories. We're not going to ever have an NRC that decides to shut all the reactors down. I mean, if we had an NRC that cared about regulation, they would have shut the Mark 1s down on March 12th, 2011. But, we don't. It's not going to happen. So we have to keep up the pressure. We have to keep it up every single venue we can. We have to keep it up at the congressional level. We have to keep it up at the NRC level, as Jim was talking about. We got to keep it up at the state level. And I tell you, we can do actually a lot more damage at the state level than we can at a lot of these other levels. But we got to keep it up, keep persisting, never stop, never give up. We can go carbon-free, nuclear-free. We know that. Renewables are getting cheaper. Nuclear is getting more expensive. The crossover's already happened. It's not a matter of technology. It's a matter of policy. That means it's a matter of public will. That means it's a matter of how much will do we have. Well, I've got a lot of damn will, and I know you do too, so let's get forward.
Up next, we're going to break it up with a little music. We have 2 songs from one of the biggest contributors to making this weekend, 3 days possible, Hal Levy from Nuclear Podcast. She has a radio show that you can hear called Nuclear Podcast. She's helped us out a lot with media work and organizing the media packets for the congressional briefing today. She really put a heck of a lot of work into these 3 days, so she's going to sing us a couple songs.
Is this one going? Yeah, it is. Okay, so it's Libby Halevi, and most of you know me from either Nuclear Hot Seat or my work with C.A.N. Thank you. But I have lived many past lives, all of them inside this body, and one of them included more than 30 years professionally in theater, where among other things I wrote plays and musicals that won awards and got optioned and never quite went as far as I wanted them to. What I'd like to share with you now is a song. Is Patrick here, by the way, to do our tech? Because if he's not here, I've got a problem. Is Patrick here to take care of our tech? I can vamp. Could you get him? I don't want to do the acapella one first. One of the things that I like to do is take an alternative perspective on whatever's happening in the world and somehow twist it into a different form. I think that using music, using theater, using live entertainment is a great way to get beyond people's sticking points about considering aspects of the issue and get them to really start considering things that they haven't been considering before. So I've done things like written a musical called Armageddon, the Living End, which is a positive look at the end of the world. Actually, that was the show that I was working on when I went to the environment that I will be singing about in the song that will happen as soon as Patrick comes here and we can do our tech. And what I found is that by using satire, by using humor, by using rhyme, it's an effective way to communicate to people who normally would not want to do that, would not want to hear. So what I'm about to share with you is based on a true story. So imagine, if you will, it's Weimar Republic, Germany. We're all together in a dark and smoky cabaret. A woman walks out on stage. She is Marlene Dietrich, or a very good impersonator. She's very world-weary. And she sings. Only 1 mile from 3 Mile Island, I had me a terrible date. It messed up my car, it was almost a bomb, and the name of that bastard was fate. Oh, a girlfriend from Boston had moved and got lost in that small townish mania of South Pennsylvania. I need vacation, some crazed recreation. I called, she said yes, how could anyone guess that in 5 days we know what came to pass? When a nuclear power plant belched and got gas, xenon gas. Mile from 3 Mile Island, I had me a terrible date. It messed up my car, it was almost a bomb, and the name of that bastard was fate. Oh, the day fate intruded, I hung out quite looted, till hunger's a bore made me run to the store. There's a clerk told some stranger that there was no danger. There are no effects, say much worse than an X-ray. When I asked what she spoke about that day, she said nuclear plant about 1 mile that day. Oy vey! Only 1 mile from 3 Mile Island, I had me a terrible date. It messed up my car, it was almost a bomb, and the name of that bastard was fate. Well, quite unlike Nero, I stood at ground zero, appalled in the terror of nuclear error. I stared in the mirror as madness drew nearer. This wasn't pretending the future was ending. I looked at my face without surprise, just sadness to see the world's end in my eyes. Join me, only 1 mile from 3 Mile Island, I had me a terrible date. It messed up my car, it was almost a bomb, and the name of that bastard was fate. Oh, we left my vacation in evacuation and drove to a farm where the world did no harm. At the news on the telly, my knees turned to jelly, 'cause I learned from TV what had happened to me. Now while the government tells me I'm alright, yeah, sure, what do I tell my former sons late every night? Only 1 mile from 3 Mile Island, I at best. Everybody sing! Only one call from 3 Mile Island. I had sleep shadows the most. Thickness of my calm was almost a bomb, and the name of that best was fate. It was fate! It was fate! Except the part about the Quaaludes, I just needed the rhyme. But I was 1 mile from 3 Mile Island when the accident happened, visiting a friend who had moved there just 3 months before. Her husband was an airplane mechanic at Harrisburg Airport. He'd gotten a job and they moved down there, and I went to visit, and what can I say, bad timing. I also live only 30 miles away from Santa Susana Fieldland, so I just have got this radar when it comes to nuclear accidents. But in any event, first day, we ignored it. They didn't have a TV set. We thought it was just media hype. Second day, I played the game of freelance reporter, and I went walking around in the Pennsylvania sunshine in spring, breathing deeply all the way while I did interviews and wrote an article for LA Weekly. And then the third day was when the bullhorns went down the street and let us know that it was a lot worse than anybody had let us know before that. And we did evacuate 150 miles away to a friend's farm, which was the first time I watched TV about this. It was the Walter Cronkite special, where he was really the angriest I had seen him since the Democratic National Convention. And that night, needless to say, it was not a good night of sleep for me. I was a stranger in a strange land. I did not know why I was there. I did not know what had been done to my body. I'd actually brought to Pennsylvania with me a musical that I was working on, the aforesaid satire that song ended up being placed into. But I was suddenly living in political satire, and it wasn't very funny. And I didn't know what I was going to do, so I had this bad night of sleep. And in the morning, I had a remarkable experience that I woke up with a song in my head, both music and lyrics, and I don't usually do music. And it kind of just fell out in a solid piece. And I've always considered this song something that was the emergency cry from the other side for what was actually happening. I do know that I held on to this song throughout the entire time after that, where it was post-traumatic stress and all kinds of problems. It was a song that changed the direction of my life. And I'm going to share it with you now in the form that it came to me, which was a cappella. And in theatrical terminology, I knew immediately as I wrote this out that it was a father's song to his children. You come to me for answers, you think I know it all, but the old man on your mountains had a fall. The guru's out of business, the font of wisdom's dry, and your dad is just a man who'd like to cry. I'm not a Superman, I'm not a giant, don't like to pick a fight that makes me too defiant. And when I speak, you think I'm weak like all my winning days are through. Please forgive me, I'm scared too. I can't be Peter Pan, I've got no magic. My life is ordinary, Tom, Dick, Harry, tragic. And I'm not strong, is that so wrong? I long to be much more, I do. But there's limits on me, I'm scared too. When I was young, I thought my life would be adventure pure and rare. I'd conquer every evil enemy and live without a care. But when you age, you lose your rage and learn to live within your role. The kids and wife become your life, and peace is suddenly your goal. Don't turn away from me. Don't wish me bolder. Don't hate the way I am because I've gotten older. I'm not some god, I'm just your father. And the one thing I can do is the truth. And so I tell you, I'm scared too.
Romney and Barack Obama to come tonight, but we got an actual candidate for president. Jill Stein is here. Success of our movement. What's the greatest thing and the only good thing about Rocky Flats? It's shut. We shut it. People from the Rocky Mountain Truth Force sitting on those railroad tracks year after year after year. Tremendously brilliant, effective, nonviolent movement. And unfortunately, there were people living downwind. And Kristen was one of them. And she wrote this amazing book. I have looked through it. I did a lot of work on Rocky Flats. We had a chapter on Rocky Flats in Killing Our Own, which Bob Alvarez, and Bob Alvarez is not here tonight. I want to acknowledge Bob Alvarez, by the way. One of the great real forces in movement. And did I see, yes, David Freeman back there? Yeah. David Freeman is here. One of our great leaders. So Kristen has written this incredible book. She is an actual writer. She's an English, a PhD in English, which I highly recommend doing. and is the head of the MFA program at Memphis University. But this book is very powerful. She's making a very important book tour. She's selling books out there. And so without further ado, Kristen Iverson, thank you very much.
Thanks so much for having me here tonight. And I can't say I was moved to tears when I heard that that Manhattan Park didn't go through today. Thank God. One of the things that I hope will never happen is that the Rocky Flats so-called National Wildlife Refuge, which is more of a cover-up than cleanup, I hope that never ever opens to the public. It's closed, but it's not safe. I wanted to tell you just a little bit about who I am and why I wrote this book, and then I thought I would just read very briefly from the opening chapter, actually. As you know, there's an intimate connection between nuclear weapons and nuclear power. I grew up next to Rocky Flats. Our first house was about 7 miles from the plant, and our second house, we moved up, so to speak, and moved to one of the new subdivisions out there, so our house was about 3 miles from the plant. I spent my entire childhood, adolescence, young adulthood near Rocky Flats. As you all know, there was extensive radioactive and toxic contamination in the environment. We had no idea. We had no idea in my neighborhood that because the plant was operated by Dow Chemical, the rumor in my neighborhood was that they were making household cleaning supplies. My mother thought they were making scrubbing bubbles. They were not making scrubbing bubbles. They were making more than 70,000 plutonium pits for nuclear weapons, and we did not know. Later, like many of the kids in my neighborhood, I went to work at Rocky Flats myself. And it was the night that I came home from work. I mentioned this earlier today at the rally. Came home from work and put my 2 kids to bed and turned on the television and saw a Nightline expose on Rocky Flats. Mark Silverman, the Department of Energy manager that I work for out there, was talking about how there were more than 14 tons of plutonium at Rocky Flats, most of it unsafely stored. That was the night that I knew I would quit, and the day that I quit was the day that I knew I would write a book. And I want to emphasize again what a profound impact activism has had at Rocky Flats over the years and to the present day. They're building houses right next to Rocky Flats. There are no signs out there. We've worked so hard to try to get signs out there. People who buy houses out there or go, they're putting up shopping malls. There's incredible development out there. And people do not know that that entire site is contaminated, and 1,300 acres of the site are so profoundly contaminated that they can never, ever be open to the public. What I wanted to read to you from, just a little bit from this opening chapter, is something that happened in 1969. As many of you know, there were lots of problems at Rocky Flats. Over the years, there were more than 200 fires. The 2 biggest fires were in 1957, the year before I was born, and 1969, the year that we moved out to our new house and we moved closer to the plant. On this particular day, May 11th, 1969, there was a huge fire in the plutonium processing building, and a radioactive cloud traveled over the city of Denver. contamination was found as far away as 30 miles, plutonium contamination 30 miles from the plant. We didn't learn this until 1970, years after it happened. If you're interested, on our website, there's a map based on Department of Energy information that shows the plume that traveled over Denver. While this was going on, my family, like many of the families in the area, we were having Mother's Day brunch. We had no idea what was going on. There was no warning, no evacuation, nothing. I want to read to you just very briefly from a section in this opening chapter. And this is, I was very fortunate. This book took 10 years of research and writing. And there are two guys in this opening chapter, Stan Skinger and Bill Dennison. I was able to have interviews with both of these guys. They're not firefighters, they're guards. And they showed up to work on this particular day on Mother's Day. They showed up at the gate and they said, don't go to your regular duty. We want you to go down to the plutonium processing building because we have a little problem. And so this is where it starts. When they arrive on the east side of the plutonium processing building, it looks quiet and clean, at least from the outside. There's a loading dock with doors on each side and a set of double doors that leads into an interior hallway. The men pull on their masks and strap on their air tanks. CO2 only, Bill says, no water. Stan nods. They open the door, move into the hallway, and enter the main production area. Holy cow. Stan stops in his tracks. Usually as bright as a supermarket, the room is nearly pitch black. A few emergency lights glow dully. The only noise comes from the fans feeding a fire he can feel more than see. I can't even see my hand in front of my face, he mutters. Smoke rolls toward them in waves. Bill sees the orange glow and moves closer. It looks like the flames are shooting up over the glove boxes. You know, glove boxes are the boxes which the workers manipulated the plutonium triggers. 1, 2, 3 glove boxes. No, all of them. He knows the look of this kind of fire. It reminds him of forest fires he's seen in films, high, fast-moving flames, but the color is different. It's the distinct, unearthly brilliance of burning metal. What is that? Stan yells. Plutonium. Probably the magnesium carriers, too. The heat is intense. Stan feels it through his mask. It's not just the plutonium, he yells. It's the plastic, the shielding. It's the Benelux around those glove boxes. Benelux doesn't burn. It's burning. Why is it burning? The plexiglass, too, Bill shouts. The plexiglass is on fire. It takes a lot of radiant heat to make something like that flammable, Stan thinks. This fire has been going on for a while. Burning globes crash from the ceiling. It's hard to tell whether they're just light fixtures or pendants, the baskets that carry plutonium nuggets down the production line. Come on, Stan says. Time is short. He knows this building. Both men have walked it hundreds of times, upstairs and down. The two buildings are connected. The 776 side has 2 floors. 777 has 1. Protecting the roof of 777 is crucial. The plenums, the filters, stretch across the entire roof area. Stan likes to compare a plenum to the air filter on a car. With a car, you clean the air before you pull it into the engine. In a plutonium processing building, you clean the air in the building before you blow it out into the atmosphere. The flow is reversed from inside to outside. If the fire burns through the plenums on the 777 roof, massive amounts of plutonium, as well as other contaminants and radioactive material, will spread over the Denver area and beyond. Stan opens a cabinet and finds a stack of hard hats. He hands one to Bill and straps one on himself. Where are the other firefighters, he wonders. They're unaware of the Jesser team, and this is a small team that was coming in from the other side of the building. The men inch into the room until they find the buckets of sand set in corners for extinguishing small fires. They move toward the edge of the fire and throw sand on the flames. It's like throwing grains of rice in the face of an oncoming locomotive. The fire continues to grow. Bill grabs a CO2 canister and hands another to Stan. They fire them into the glove boxes. It has little effect. They empty another canister. The air in the room is unbearably hot, and the men are breathing heavily. Already they're almost out of air. The fire gallops through the line. What now? Stan yells. Bill yells something back, but Stan can't hear it. What are they supposed to do? Who are they supposed to ask? They're alone. The no water rule is the only rule they've got, but it's useless. The men bolt out of the building, shaken and gasping. They change tanks and confer briefly, ignoring the radiation monitor who's carefully chalked off a square area. "Don't step outside these lines," he barks. "Keep the contamination inside these lines," as if plutonium could possibly recognize a line of chalk. "Water?" Bill looks to Stan for confirmation. "Water. What the hell?" Stan thinks. He's not a firefighter. He's a guard. He's lived in the country, and nearly all he knows about firefighting is how to beat a prairie grass fire with a burlap sack. "You good with these things?" he asks Bill. "More or less," Bill replies. They wrestle with the nozzle. "Use the fine spray." "Got it." "Soft, gentle like," Bill says. "Hit the gases from the melting plastic first. See what happens." Okay. They re-enter the building, this time with water hoses. "We'll take turns going forward," Bill says. "I spray you, then you spray me. We need to keep each other cooled down." "Let's head toward the center," Stan says. "Get under the center beams and see how the plenum looks." "Okay." Bill turns his hose on Stan, and Stan moves forward into the smoke, trying to follow the emergency lighting on the floor. "Hey," Bill yells. Stan looks back. "Don't blow any of those plutonium pieces together. Keep them separated." "I know." Blue flash. He knows. Working in tandem, Bill and Stan move along the glove box line, directing the spray of water around the flames and then on each other. They've gone only a few feet when they see where the real fire lies, in the foundry area, where plutonium is melted and cast into pieces carried to the production line. The foundry line is 100 feet long and contains 8 furnaces, all held inside glove boxes. The entire line is ablaze. Bill curses. The men glance at each other. The production area is tight. There's only one way to get to the foundry area, through the underpasses. Some glove boxes have steps beneath them, tiny stairs going down to a miniature basement, with steps leading up the other side. This allows workers to get from one side of the production line to the other. The underpasses have no drains. Anything that spills under a glove box is contaminated and has to be cleaned up, not flushed out. There's no place for the water to go, and the underpasses are filled with water. The water is rising. "It's like a sheep dip," Bill says, and laughs. He thinks back to all the ranches he worked on as a kid. One hell of a sheep dip. "There's our criticality, Bill," Stan says. "We're looking right at it." "Who's going in?" Both men stand silent. Bill looks up and sees an elevator flipped upside down, the supporting metal scorched and twisted. People are going to get killed tonight, and he thinks it might be him and Stan. He thinks of his wife and his 2 other kids. Both men were trained for the battlefield, but it didn't prepare them for this. One thing it did teach them was to keep their feelings to themselves and move. Bill wades in. The water is up to his knees. He thinks he's moving fast, but it feels slow. He prays they haven't knocked any plutonium pits or pieces into the water, which could lead to the criticality they fear. Then he's up the other side, and the foundry fire is so hot, so immediate, that his soaked coveralls dry instantly. His face feels scorched beneath his mask. Stan is right behind him. They spray the fire until their air runs low, a few short minutes. Then they drop their hoses, wade through the sheep dip again, and fight their way back to the door. A radiation monitor is waiting when they burst from the building and yank off their masks. He checks their hands. "You're hot, man, coated." His sharpness can't hide his fear. "You can't go back in." "We're all right," Bill says. "No, you're off the chart. We gotta go back." Stan reaches for a fresh tank. The plenum's about to go. At this point, the roof of this building is rising like a marshmallow bubble. It's just about to break. "You gonna keep us out here so we can all watch the roof melt?" "I'm serious. You guys are not going back in that building." "Who else is there?" Bill asks. "We're waiting on more guys," another monitor yells. "We don't have anyone else yet. We don't even have enough gear. We're waiting for Boulder and Broomfield to bring more tanks. The only manager on duty that the men are aware of is the guard captain, who's on the phone." "Is that you, George?" Stan peers into the man's mask. He recognizes him from the lunchroom. They're both model railroad hobbyists. "I can't let you back in, Stan," George says. "Come on, what the hell are you guys thinking?" He looks toward the road. A van is on the way to take workers to building 559 for decontamination. "George," Stan says, "we let the fire get into the plenums and Denver is screwed." "Give us the tanks." Bill's voice is furious. "Can't do that." Then we'll just take them, Stan says. They strap on the tanks and pull on their masks as George, arms folded, blocks their way. Bill shoves past him. Stan follows. The men duck back into the building. I'll go first this time, Stan shouts. He runs, crouching, into the production line. He darts back and forth, spraying anything that doesn't look like plutonium. That man is as quick as a monkey, Bill thinks. After a few minutes, he sprays him down and they switch. Bill can't move quite as quickly as Stan, but it feels like they're making progress. They're both thinking about the roof. I'm out, Bill shouts and gestures toward his tank. Stan nods and wonders if the heat and exertion are causing them to go through their air tanks more quickly than usual, or if the tanks are only partially filled. Abruptly, Stan is knocked to the floor, flat on his back, covered with debris. He can't see anything. He doesn't lose consciousness, but it takes him a moment to realize that his body is covered with a heavy material, ceiling material. His heart pounds. The roof, this is it, he thinks. The roof is gone. It's over. But nothing happens. He looks up to see Bill still standing. He finds he can move his arms and legs, so he sits up and looks around. He's covered with gunk, messy, sticky gunk, and he pulls a soggy piece off his arm. Bill points to a gap in the ceiling, a false ceiling made of fiber material in 2-foot by 3-foot sections. They've sprayed it repeatedly with their hoses, and the tiles have collapsed from the weight of the water. Stan is covered with nothing more than soaked ceiling tiles. The roof is still intact. He stands up and Bill cleans him off. He can't read Bill's face. Outside, they explode with laughter. I hate to admit it, Stan says, but I think that's the closest I've ever come to shitting my pants. The statement strikes them both as hilarious, and they switch to new tanks. I'm going to skip up and I'm just going to read you just a little bit at the end so you get a sense of what happened at the end of this fire and how incredibly close we came. And of course, if this event had ended differently, I would not be standing in front of you today. Bill Denison's arms and legs are heavy with exhaustion. Stan, too, is tired. A relief crew of firefighters has arrived at the west side of the building where Jesser and his crew are working, but there's no one to relieve the 2 guards. They both figure they had the last of their bad luck when the ceiling fell. They survived wading through the sheet dips. The fire, if not diminishing, at least is not growing. The worst is over, must be over, if they can just hang on a little longer. It's Stan's turn to go ahead. Their tanks are getting low and Bill is misting Stan, keeping him cool. Stan stoops down to pick up his hose. It looks like it's charred on one side, but still usable. He turns it on, but it's too hard, too fast, and it shoots out on full steam. No good, he thinks. He wants to wet down the material, not blow it around. He tries to turn the valve and slow it down, but it's still too much. He shuts it all the way off and the hose goes from full pressure to no pressure. Suddenly, the backed up water bursts through the side of the hose. It catches his mask and pulls it off. The burning air hits his face full force. The hose flails around him like a wild snake. Stan tries to think clearly. Get the mask back on, he thinks. Don't breathe. Where is the strap? The strap catches on his nose. Everything is out of place. 30 seconds pass and he's still holding his breath. His fingers fumble through the heavy gloves. Another 30 seconds. He thinks of all the crud they use in there. Plastics, vinyl, rubber paints, carbon tetrachloride, cleaning chemicals, Benelex and plexiglass. Oh, and plutonium. He needs air. He can't help it. He knows he shouldn't breathe, but he has to. He takes one big gulp and holds it. He keeps holding it another minute at least until he gets the mask pulled back on. Bill pulls him around. You okay? Stan exhales into his mask and nods. I'm okay. They go back for new tanks. One more run, they think. They can do at least one more. But Bill's bad luck isn't over yet either. The men finish their air and head for the door. As they're crossing the floor, a blazing fluorescent light fixture crashes from the ceiling, nearly knocking off Bill's hard hat. He staggers, dazed. His oxygen tank is empty. He can't breathe, and he's lost Stan in the smoke and the dark. A man, another guard, appears. Bill recognizes him, Charlie Parisi. He's come off the roof to help relieve Stan and Bill. Charlie's a small man, shorter than Bill, but he pulls Bill up on his shoulders and brings him out into the air. They're all contaminated. Charlie has kept his mask on, but he smells smoke. The same smoke Stan experienced, but somehow it's gotten inside his mask. The fire isn't out, but it's more or less under control, and the men stagger to the van that will take him to decon. For the citizens of Colorado, luck plays a big role on the afternoon of Mother's Day, May 11th, 1969. There are 3 lucky breaks, all largely the result of human error. The first stroke of luck occurred earlier in the week when workers accidentally left behind a metal plate that blocks the north glove box line. This plate forces the racing fire to turn from building 777, a single-story building with an extremely vulnerable roof that probably would have collapsed immediately, to building 776. 776 has a second story and is a little less susceptible. This buys time. The second lucky break occurs when a member of the other team, Jesser's team, tries to hose a burning pile of plutonium into a corner. Burning plutonium turns into a heavy sludge of plutonium oxide ash, as heavy as wet cement. The pile won't move. Later, an AEC fire investigator will report that if the firemen had been successful in moving the sludge and pushing pieces of plutonium together, a criticality would have been the inevitable result. The third piece of luck is the most important and is nothing short of deja vu for Bill Dennison, who also fought the 1957 fire. This exact same thing happened in 1957. A flustered fireman inadvertently backs a fire truck into a power pole adjacent to the building. Just as in 1957, an accidental power cutoff occurs, and just in the nick of time. The fans, which have been sucking the fire into the filter bank, feeding it and causing the roof to melt, stop spinning. The fire still burns, but more slowly, the roof holds. Wow. And that's why I'm here. I just want to say thank you to all of you for all the good work that you do, and please, let's not ever let anything like this happen again. And companies will not tell us the truth about when things like this happen.